Call this meeting to order. Mike, would you lead us in the pledge, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Ann, would you call the roll, please? Here.
Mr. Reiner?
Here.
Mr. Gerber?
Here.
Mr. Keenan? Here. Ms. Genesee Zerker?
Here.
Great, thank you very much. We'll begin this evening with a couple of proclamations. The first, with just one proclamation, but before that, we're going to have an update from the Dublin Convention and Visitors Bureau. Scott Dring, Executive Director, and I believe he has a few comments. Appears as though he has a board member with him. And I think there's going to be a short video.
Absolutely.
It's all yours,
Thank
Scott.
you. Our board president, Eric Belfridge. Good evening, everyone. It's a little anticlimactic, but we're here to officially announce that Dublin will be host to the Football University Top Gun Camp in 2014. So we're excited. It was very competitive. A lot of other cities across the country obviously were vying for the event. Last year's camp resulted in one of the largest events that Dublin has ever hosted, almost 4,500 room nights, which actually was more room nights than the Memorial Tournament hosted last year as well. Again, it's an invitation camp only. Attracts 1,500 of the top prep, middle school and high school football players from across the United States. Last year, visitors came from nearly every state in the country, and also countries such as Canada, England, Scotland, and Germany. The event will be held at Jerome High School, July 17th to the 23rd, and the Ohio Regional Camp is also going to be in Dublin. That's going to be at Scioto High School, July 11th through 13th. The camp, a little bit background, if you recall, is a non-contact camp which really focuses on teaching the proper techniques and fundamentals of the game. Instructors include NFL current coach and former coaches and players, so they are getting the best of the best in terms of learning the fundamentals and the proper way to play the game. Attracting this event this year was, again, a true collaboration every sense of the word. The City of Dublin City Council, the Bureau, and Dublin City Schools as well. We would also like to thank Nationwide Children's Sports Medicine for their support. Eddie Novell is back there. Raise your hand, Eddie. He came and they provided a tremendous amount of their service pro bono as well for that event. Of course, Josh Bricker on our staff was instrumental in getting that event. So we're excited to bring that back in 2014. Next year will be a very busy year. If you recall, several years ago we collaborated on an event to get the 2014 U.S. Australian Rules Football Championships to Dublin. That is here finally. It'll be here in October at Dory Fields. That will attract 40 teams from all across the country. Will generate close to 2,400 room nights, and again, will be a huge event for us here in the city of Dublin. So it'll be a huge event, a huge summer and fall next year. It's been a few months now since we had the President's Cup, and we're still experiencing a very positive impact. As you know, we've talked about the economic impact, but we're excited to learn just a couple of days ago, we got the October bed tax numbers, and October of this year represented the largest bed tax number in the history of the city of Dublin. So that tells you how huge the President's Cup. It's nice to have tangible, real stuff to look at and feel, and that is obviously a huge metric that we use, and it shows exactly the kind of impact that event was for the city.
Excuse me, Scott, just to be clear.
Yep.
Not the largest October, but the largest month ever.
Month ever in the history of tracking bed tax revenue. Yep, absolutely. I mean, it wasn't even close. So. Obviously, we did a lot to build upon that. Above beyond the economic impact, it's an event that we're going to use for years to come. We will continue to sell that event, show the world the kind of event we can attract Dublin, hopes to getting future events as well. So it's something we will continue to use. As you recall, we created several initiatives to kind of leverage the President's Cup and the event. One such initiative was Dublin's Top 18 Moments that all of our residents participated in, had a lot of fun, a lot of participation to really count down the top 18 moments. And kind of in appreciation for councils and the city's efforts to not only bring the President's Cup here, but to help us and to host it. We have a little, the Bar Board of Directors have a little appreciation gift for you. It's, Eric will hold it. It's the top 18 moments. It's a poster. It's framed. And also Jack Nicholas has also signed it for you as well. So again, thank you for your efforts to the President's Cup. and we hope you enjoyed it. It was a great campaign and with a lot of excitement in the community for it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And finally, we're going to kind of end quickly. We are excited to release our new destination video. It's only 3 minutes that we're going to show you real briefly. You've seen a lot of destination videos that pretty much are the same old, same old. We wanted to do something different and unique, so we created what we see as a music video promoting the city of Dublin. We used a local band to produce it, and we hope you enjoy it. Thank you.
Thank you.
As I drive this ring of Kerry, I see how hard you fought to be free, and I feel so spoiled, so vain. I'll never complain for myself when it rains, never again. 1, 2, 3, 4. Your beauty cannot be denied. It scares me to death. Oh, it fills me with joy. You've left me here in torment. When I'm long dead and gone, may the stone by my head tell that the day I saw your face, I was changed. Oh, the day I saw your face, I was changed. And as I drive this ring of Kerry, I see how hard you fought to be free, and I feel so spoiled, so vain. I'll never complain, never again. You're the bride that cannot be touched, ideals captured in the real. Are you the answer to all of my prayers? And as I drive this ring of Kerry, and I see how hard you fought to be free, and I feel so spoiled, so vain. I'll never complain, never again. I'll always be singing this song to you, not knowing if you'll ever be mine. As long as I see you once in a while, I know my life will be fine. As I drive this ring of Kerry, I see how hard you fought to be free, and I feel so spoiled, so vain. I'll never complain, never again. No, never again.
Well, very nice, Scott. Thank you. Is Eric still here? There you are, Eric. Thank you very much. That's very impressive. So that can be accessed via your website. We're going to have a link.
Absolutely. It's on YouTube, our channel. It's on the cities so as well. So
Great.
so enjoy.
Very nice. Very nice. Thank you. We appreciate it. Well, while we're on the subjects of videos, we have the Kaufman High School, or at least some representatives from the Kaufman High School Marching Band, and I think they have a short video. So before I ask you to come forward, if we can cue up the video.
apologize for the volume.
This is from a competition this summer at Lucas Oil Stadium, and they competed in the Bands of America Grand National Championships. I'm sorry, it wasn't this summer, it was November. So if those band members that are in attendance, if you would come forward, please. Okay, we're good? Come on up here and we'll face the audience. Apologize for the technical difficulties with the audio there. Is this anywhere? Is it on YouTube anywhere? Is it on a site where we can access it?
Oh, there's Jeremy.
Yes, we have our own website at dublinmusic.org where we post our videos from most competitions and football games.
And your name is?
Simon Bogeson. Yes, I'm the band president.
Great, very good. Mr. Bradstreet, why don't you come on over, please? I was told you had to leave for another engagement. You made it back?
Yeah, we did. Sixth grade band concert at Carr Middle School.
Okay.
So they got done, came right over.
Very good, thank you. Appreciate it. You're a busy man. Well, I think we all know of the reputation for excellence amongst our marching bands, not only at Dublin Kaufman, but at Scioto and Jerome as well. But in any event, in that tradition, we all got a glimpse of your performance there in Indianapolis, and I misspoke. It was not this summer, but it was just recently, just last month, I guess. But quite a prestigious event. And in recognition thereof, I have a proclamation that I'd like to read. It states as follows: whereas the Dublin Kaufman High School Marching Band competed in the Bands of America Grand National Championships in Indianapolis, Indiana, November 14th through the 16th, and whereas the Grand National Championship is an educational performance opportunity open to all high school bands on a first-come, first-served basis, and whereas the competition also is a spectacular display of music and pageantry, and one that band fans from across the nation and around the world attend to experience the exciting and creative performances. And whereas the Grand National Championship is held in Lucas Oil Stadium, one of the world's premier indoor venues, and whereas the national competition includes 90 bands from throughout the U.S., and whereas bands receive recorded evaluations from panels of leading educators and marching experts, along with written score sheets, and whereas the Dublin Kaufman High School Marching Band performed The Ocean Within and achieved its best performance of the season, and whereas the Dublin Kaufman High School whereas for the first time, the Dublin Kaufman Marching Band reached the semifinals. And now, therefore, I, Timothy A. Lecklider, Mayor of the City of Dublin, Ohio, on behalf of Dublin City Council, do hereby honor the Dublin Kaufman High School Marching Band for its outstanding performance and the positive recognition it has brought to Dublin City schools and the City of Dublin. And congratulations. And before I ask Mr. Bradstreet to make a few comments, I'm going to pass the microphone around, and if you guys would just state your names, please.
I'm Simon Bogeson.
I'm Clara Pusey.
I'm Bridget Farahay.
I'm Alex Scarmuzzi.
I'm Pranav Pamadigantam.
I'm Patrick Ilson.
Naomi Marino.
Gabe Sims.
Kapil Shankaran.
Haley Philbin.
Roma Yango.
Thank you all. Mr. Bradstreet.
Well, thank you so much. On behalf of all the kids in the Dublin Kaufman Marching Band, we wouldn't even be able to fit everybody in here. So nice to have our representatives here. I'd like to thank you, Mayor, for recognizing these students' achievements. They work really, really hard. And I can't think of any group of kids finer in Dublin City schools to represent not only our high school, but also our community on a national level. I'm very proud of these kids and their work ethic and the life lessons that they learned through our band program. I hope sticks with them for a long, long time. So thank you so much for recognizing them this evening.
Thank you, and congratulations again. And then finally, for this portion of the program anyway, Chief von Eckertsburg is going to introduce the Dublin Police Community Impact Unit. Chief?
Why don't you guys, is it okay if
Sure.
we line up facing
Yeah.
the audience? No, okay. I promise, we do have officers out patrolling the streets, too. This isn't everybody. Mayor, members of council, Ms. Grigsby, I just wanted to present to you the new Community Impact Unit and tell you, as you know, our focus at the police department is on reducing property crime, reducing traffic crashes, being prepared to deal with major crime and doing all that while providing great customer service. And last year, we presented the city manager and our budget committee with some proposals to try to help us do that more effectively and more efficiently. One thing we did is we ensured that in the police department we did a reorganization so that the only jobs sworn officers are performing are jobs that only sworn officers can do. And the other thing we did was we created this unit, and this unit enables us to provide a component to address crime trends, and it also allows us to have a unit to deal with traffic issues, reducing traffic crashes, and dealing with neighborhood traffic complaints. So that's the unit's mission. Today was actually the first day in operation for our CIU investigators. The unit's led by Sergeant Justin Pice over here. Our CIU investigators are Officer Dave Jager, Officer Joel Hall. Starting January 1, 2 of our traffic officers will begin work, Officer Dan Beam and Officer Todd Evans. Give us a little high sign. There we go. And Officer Eric Cochran as well with Barre will be starting January 1st. And July 1st, Officer Scott Brown and Officer Chuck Sterling will begin working with the unit as well. And the only reason we're staggering them is we're hiring people and filling our vacancies, and until we do that, we can't bring them all in at one time. So there's a very competitive process for all these positions, and this is a motivated group, and we're anxious to put them to work.
Great.
I'm sorry, I didn't introduce Lieutenant John DeJarnette. He'll let me know about it if I don't do that. Our Operations Bureau Commander and Sergeant Pice's boss. So this is our Community Impact Unit. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thanks, Chief. And you know, all of council was pleased with the formation of this unit. Obviously, we're supportive. You know, it's I guess, an updated iteration of the unit that had existed in the past. You know, this seems to have a little wider range in terms of responsibilities and so forth, but attuned to the times, if you will.
Absolutely. And actually, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I am remiss. I just want to make sure you understand how grateful we are to council for supporting this initiative and our ability to put these officers on the street. So thank you.
I also am sorry that the officers have left, because one thing that I was really impressed with too was we have we all know we have a very outstanding police force to begin with, but then when you read their bios, their experience both here and elsewhere and their education is very, very impressive. And certainly we are very fortunate that your recruitment works, and very long term. Most of them have been here quite a long time and committed to our community as well.
That's absolutely true. And I'll tell you right now that there's other officers that weren't fortunate enough to be a part of this right now that could have done just as good a job.
Sure.
But you know, we have to make that pick, and we're convinced that we have some very, very good officers that are a part of this new unit.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, moving on to citizen comments. Regarding items not on the agenda, we have just one this evening. That's Mr. Maurer, if you'd like to come forward.
I was shocked some time ago, and still am, by the behavior of a group of persons who one would think had razor-sharp intelligences and capacity to pierce into the mind of anybody who's listening to them. I was shocked by their decision which they made. Now I'm referring to a group of persons who constitute the Supreme Court of the United States, Supreme Court of these United States, for a decision which they made some time back. And that was when they said that corporations are persons. The decision was stupefying, catastrophic. Elections can be bought and sold with it, and defies all common sense. I shall shatter it with an example of common sense. During the past few months, I've been holed up in my dump, which has a good piano in it, in which I've been preparing a couple of piano concerts. And I'm going to use a cliche here, my social life has been virtually zero. So to shatter the decision of the Supreme Court, I would tell you that, well, I suppose I should break out one of these days and have a date. And since the corporations are persons, I could date a corporation, except that they aren't persons. I might have an interesting conversation with a corporation, but not a date. So I'm still shocked by that decision. And I'll leave it at that point. I, of course, am the only person in the area who regrets mightily that the university coaches of football have been invited, are coming here in the face of the scandal revealed by Frontline some weeks ago of concussions in the game. There are now two scores to keep when you watch a football game. One is the score of the football, and the other one is the score of the concussions. It is immoral, I think, on the part to have them here. And the only defense will be mothers. Ask a mother if you have a boy on the football team, and ask her if she'd like to have a life of cabbage heads later. Well, that's the deepest joy I've been able to spread at this point, at the moment.
Excuse me, Mr. Maurer, I just want to say very briefly that I was having a conversation with Josh Bricker from the Convention and Visitors Bureau, and if you're so inclined, you might give him a call. But insofar as you're talking about, I've been speaking to this academy that's coming this summer again to Dublin, the football academy. One of the primary objectives of that academy is to teach the participants safe techniques, so as to hopefully avoid concussions and that sort of thing. So that is a focus. I mean, I don't think that this sport is going to go away anytime soon. But one of the primary objectives is to teach them the proper techniques so that they don't suffer these injuries that you've been speaking of. But Josh Bricker can give you more information if you're interested.
Oh, I'd be happy to talk with him.
Okay.
Very happy.
Okay.
You cannot have, the game is going to change utterly. It'll turn into tag football, which I'll play too. But you can see some of the things that are happening now. Quarterbacks are winning the games, and that is fomenting one of the posse plays in football, and that is get the quarterback. And you saw what happened to Aaron Rodgers up to this point. No, there's no argument for it. And as I say, I'm coming in here some night to give you my argument for the abolition of football in universities, at the very least.
Thank you, Mr. Maurer. Moving on to our consent agenda. There are 5 items listed on this evening's consent agenda. Excuse me, does anybody wish to remove any of the items?
I don't wish to remove any items, but I did want to draw attention to one of them, and that is the second item, which is the permit for WAF 79 LLC and patio, the former Mary Kelly site, and just that, in the addition of that word "and patio" made me a little bit nervous. I wanted to make sure that we were not somehow complicit in making that business think that we were okay with the patio being used at that location, because
We had already approved the patio.
the front patio, but not the side. That's okay. Okay, thank you. I just wanted to clarify that.
But just to be clear, and patio, that's their corporate name. Is that right?
I understand that.
I understand what you're saying. We don't want to make it sound like yes.
Yeah, just wanted to point that out.
Okay.
That's all I have.
Okay. If there's nothing else, then I would move for approval of the actions requested with respect to these 5 items. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. And if you call for the vote.
Vice Mayor Salee?
Yes.
Mayor Lechleiter?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan?
Yes.
Ms. Janice Zerker?
Yes.
Mr. Gerber?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to our second readings, beginning with ordinance 85-13.
Adopting the annual operating budget for the fiscal year ending December 31, 2014, and declaring an emergency.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. As you are aware, we had budget workshops on, November 6th and November 20th, and the document you see in front of you reflects those discussions that we had during that meeting, as well as, I believe it was just one change that was made as a result of those budget workshops. Certainly, we have outlined what I believe to be any outstanding questions that came out of those meetings, and hopefully that has answered any questions you might have. Otherwise, I would be more than welcome to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Shirley?
I had one question on the, related to the hotel motel tax fund. You indicated it had 3.25 million in the balance of it, and then you go on to state that the relief work, which I'd like a definition of what that means, for the overpass project will be funded through bed tax and TIFs, and that funds had yet to be allocated. What is the definition of relief work?
The work that we were going to be looking to the bed tax funds as well as other TIF funds would be the artwork component of this. What Sarah Ott has been working on, that is what we would be looking towards these funds to be using for payment.
And do we have an amount of the artwork's going to cost?
I don't have an amount as of this time.
Yeah, I don't know that there's an exact amount yet. We have a pretty good range at this point in time, and Sarah can provide a pretty good update on that.
What kind of balance do we want to keep? I think maybe where you're driving at in terms of the balance in the bed tax fund.
Well, certainly, we want to make sure that, you know, we look at what are our expenses for our Irish Festival, which is our largest expense coming out of that fund, as well as other events, and make sure that should a catastrophic event happen, whereas the Dublin Irish Festival gets rained out, but we still have a number of expenses to make that we can meet all those. So as we work through what the expenses are related to this, we will look at available TIF fund balances. There's no magic number. But we will be making sure that we have sufficient funds available to keep operating all of the things that we normally pay for out of bed tax dollars.
Why do we say then, I guess that's an interesting answer, because when I read this, I didn't read it as what was already, we already know that we fund all those things out of the bed tax. Right. So I read this as after we fund those, we would have 3.2 million left.
Oh, no. The question that was asked at the budget workshop what was the unencumbered balance? I believe it was in Councilmember Keenan's email question. It was what was the balance in the hotel motel TIF fund?
From this year?
Or right, and that is the unencumbered
So it's
balance.
3.2 million.
Correct.
But I always thought there was $1 million of encumbered funds for the weather event, if you will,
Right.
for the Irish Festival.
I mean, that's in our
always been
regular
my
operating
understanding.
budget that we fund this way.
Correct. But there's also in with the operating budget projected revenue that's coming in as well.
Well, still, it's either encumbered or it's not, and the balance is either 3.2 million or it's 2.2 if you're using $1 million to.
Well, and all the other
all the
events
others.
that
Yeah,
they
exactly.
fund out of this. I guess wasn't your question, that's what confused me. I guess I had read your original question as meaning after you take out what we know we fund, what was left?
What did we have, yeah, what did we have left available to put towards this project? I hadn't even thought about the TIF funds. This reads like you're going to use the bed tax and the TIF funds, or some combination thereof, to pay for this.
And my apologies because I misunderstood your question. The unencumbered balance in the hotel the balance in the hotel motel tax fund is $3.2 million. I don't have the encumbrance right in front of me. I can provide that to you in a follow-up memo.
Yeah, that's fine.
We will look to this as well as, and I'll look at the encumbrances to see what we exactly have set aside for those contingencies.
So there is a balance that's not encumbered. That's
Yes.
the number we need to know.
Yes. Yes,
And
and
then-
I'm sorry, I misunderstood your question.
So that's all right. Then secondly, do we really need to have $1 million encumbered for the, I mean, we've got a lot of years of experience. I know we've talked about the terrible washout and so forth,
some years
but
ago.
all these years we've done that, we've used that number for a long, long time. I don't know if it's right or wrong. I'm just saying maybe we ought to think about, should that be the number?
Well, and part of what we've looked at, and the reason we're recommending that we use the hotel motel tax fund for the art enhancement to the interchange is because we do have this significant fund balance. And the goal has been to make sure we have sufficient dollars to support the Irish Festival in the event that we have some bad weather. And typically you need $1 million to probably $1.2 million to help
Fund it.
offset.
Right.
Because there are certain revenues that come in no matter what the weather is. So yeah, we have sufficient dollars in this account to support a down year, as well as do some additional projects like the interchange artwork.
And is the expectation that the interchange artwork will be coming before the Finance Committee for ultimate approval?
As far as the funding, I mean, there will be additional, there will be an additional dollar request to appropriate the funds for the project.
To the Finance Committee and then to council, or?
Typically, I mean, we can bring that to the Finance Committee. I think at this point, we were thinking that we would have an appropriation ordinance before council, but that would be fine to schedule a discussion with the Finance Committee.
Well, I guess my assumption was it would be because it's art. And we usually, we either
The bed tax
had
grants
the,
or whatever.
Right, the bed tax issue and.
Yeah, and I think as far as the use of this revenue source or this fund, based upon the previous discussion that we had with council, that it was council's direction to allow us to use this fund for those improvements, but we'd be more than happy to come back to the.
Well, I don't have an issue with that. I think we all
No.
are in agreement there.
Yeah.
It
We'd
was
like
just
to
about
know
what's
how
the
much it
numbers.
is.
Yeah,
Sure.
what are the numbers?
And that's what I think Sarah knows. The current design was, I think, around, it was in excess of $100,000, and then the actual art component is somewhere in the neighborhood of
So currently design is approximately $260,000 from preliminary to final. And then we are currently negotiating with the Ohio Department of Transportation for what portions of the construction cost should be incorporated into project costs, given that a poured wall is a poured wall. We're affecting what the outside treatment of that may look like.
Thank you.
I guess I'm just curious, too. There's been a revenue source out of the Irish Festival. Did I see something around 150 to 200,000 black?
Yeah, that's
Does that go
probably
back
it.
to bed tax?
Yes, it does.
It goes back to bed tax?
It
Okay.
does. And the one thing, too, that we've talked about using this fund for some additional improvement to the facility that the Arts Council uses, and we have funds programmed a couple years in the CIP for improvements to that facility and the grounds. And I think currently we have somewhere in the neighborhood of $250,000 programmed, but that's like a phase of the improvements. So over the next few years, we anticipate using some of those resources for that improvement.
Okay. Anything else? Mr. Maurer?
I have two questions relative to this ordinance. First, on page 1, there's a reference to, page 1 of your commentary, there's a reference to one international meeting with Columbus 2020. Now, briefly, what is that, and are all the, this is all one question, and are all the suburbs involved in this?
Marcia, can you respond to that, please?
Part of our economic development work that we do is visiting and working with Columbus 2020, and they do missions to foreign countries. And a couple years ago, we traveled with them to Japan and met with some companies that have an interest potentially in locating in the United States, some companies that currently are in our Central Ohio area, and then just some other companies that we would like to make sure they're familiar with and aware of Central Ohio and what we all have to offer. So this would be a trip similar to that, going to a foreign country to promote the Dublin and Central Ohio.
And are all the suburbs involved in this?
I think all of them participate in Columbus 2020. I don't know that all of them attend or go to.
There was an article in the Dispatch this morning that Marysville had participated, and that was part of the 2020. And they just got back, they just entertained the delegation for Japan, and they were there earlier in the year. So it does go around.
Thank you. Second question. This concerns the funding of the ICE 270 and 33 junction here out of town. Is your current contemplation to fund the project, which Mr. Stephen, forget his second name, Weitzman, wasn't that it, presented? By the way, before I go any further, so there's no mistaking here, I think the project is a marvelous one. Now, are you contemplating funding the whole project which he set forth there?
Yes.
Yes. Oh, okay, good. Very good.
We can't do partial funding.
Yeah, well, I don't know, in your dealings with him, whether you said, well, this much, but I know you had a large citizen involvement in this. Does the city by any chance know what his fee is, what his company's fee is?
That was what Ms. Ott just spoke about, that my question and Mr. Keenan's was. So she said the design so far, the design process cost around $260,000. And then the actual work is, of course, we will incorporate the cost of all that with ODOT building the bridge.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds good?
Yep.
Sounds very good. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, those are my two questions on that issue. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Maurer. Council doesn't have any other questions. Ian, if you call for a vote, please.
On the emergency.
Oh, I'm sorry. If we could have a motion to treat this as an emergency.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. And if you'd call for a vote on the emergency.
Ms. Janice Zerker?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan? Mr. Gerber?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Salee?
Yes.
Mayor Lucklider?
Yes. And on the ordinance, please.
Vice Mayor Salee?
Yes.
Ms. Janice Zerker?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan? Mayor Lucklider?
Yes.
Mr. Gerber?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Ordinance 92-13.
Authorizing provision of certain incentives to Oxford Consulting Group, Inc. to induce it to locate and expand its office and associated operations and workforce in the city, authorizing the execution of an economic development agreement.
Thank you. Mr. Clary.
Yeah, good evening.
Good evening.
I have nothing additional to add from first reading, but I would like to introduce Michelle Kerr. She's president of Oxford Consulting Group, and I'd like her to give you a little bit more background on the company and their project here in Dublin.
That's great. Good evening. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you taking the time to hear from us tonight. As Michael mentioned, we're Oxford Consulting Group. We're founded in 1998. We're originally in Indianapolis, relocated in 2004 to the Westerville area, and now also have an office in Grandview, as well as international offices in Belfast, Northern Ireland, and the south of England. So we have, as I mentioned, 2 offices, and we are looking to consolidate the Grandview location with our Westerville, Ohio location. We service customers here and clients here in the central Ohio area, primarily around staffing for mid-sized companies as well as small business services for companies less than 50 employees. And then our largest partnership is with IBM, and we provide supply chain solutions for them on a global basis. We have about 190 employees nationwide, and about 50 or so here in the Columbus, Central Ohio area. So primarily looking to move to Dublin because of the access of infrastructure, being able to centrally get to our clients quite easily. Right now, we're really challenged in Westerville with gridlock. Basically, we can't get out easily to our customers. And then, of course, the desirability of the location to our employees. As you know, the IT market is extremely competitive, and people want to work in a place that they enjoy, that they can walk to restaurants and participate in community activities, as well as we have a number of employees that also live in the Dublin area and are interested in being in this area.
That's great.
How long have you been in Westerville?
We have been there 5 years.
Did they give you an economic agreement when you moved in there?
I'm sorry?
Did they give you an agreement when you moved in?
We have a tax abatement, and they have since forth offered other items, but really from a business perspective, it just doesn't work for us. You're pretty much landlocked there, and unless they're going to fix Polaris or Cleveland Avenue, which they continue to build, which I don't understand. It's just impossible. So
Yeah.
we spend, our small business solutions, they spend a lot of time on the road going to see our customers. And when you look at their utilization, it's 2.5 hours a day in the car.
Yeah.
And so that's not productive for our customers, and it's certainly not productive for our bottom line. So we need to be in a position where we can access 270 in a much faster fashion.
Well, we're glad to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you.
And you just heard about our plans and probably have heard of our
Yes,
plans
of course.
to improve I-270 and 33.
Yeah, absolutely, and I appreciate that.
Do you have a location in mind yet that you can tell us?
Yeah, so right now, we're looking at the metro area, 565 Metro. And the reason for that is because we are expanding, and really in Westerville, there's no opportunity for us to expand even if we wanted to stay there in the location that we are. So we wanted to be in a larger building that if we needed to take additional space, we will need to take additional space, it's easily available for us, and we don't find ourselves in this situation in another 3 or 4 years.
Great.
Yeah.
Good location and accessibility and everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great.
Absolutely.
Well, I'd like to welcome you to the community. We look forward
Yeah,
to
thank you very much.
your participation. Thank you. I think you're going to have to cede the podium here for just a minute to Mr. Maurer. He's signed up to speak to this. Thank you.
You might consider it or think this question odd, but not when you consider the source, I suppose. I'm curious to know where the term Oxford gets into the title of this company. Is this Oxford, Ohio, or is it Oxford, England, or is... Okay. Gives it a Tony name, doesn't it? Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Maurer. Well, we got to plug in for Miami University anyway, right?
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah.
For all the Miami U grads. All right, thank you very much. If there's no other conversation, questions, Ann, would you call for the vote, please?
Mr. Keenan?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Ms. Janice Zerker?
Yes.
Mr. Gerber?
Yes.
Mayor Lucklider?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Salee?
Yes,
Great, thank you very much.
thanks.
Ordinance 93-13.
Authorizing provision of certain incentives to Management and Network Services, LLC, to induce it to retain and expand an existing office and associated operations and workforce within the city, authorizing execution of an economic development agreement.
Thank you. Mr. Clary.
Yeah, again, nothing additional from the first meeting, but I'd like to turn it over to Management Network Services President John Hoffman.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm John Hoffman from Management Network Services. Since Michelle went ahead of me, I know some of the questions, so I'll go for it. We have been in Dublin since 1998, and we started out with about 6 employees, and we've grown to 129. We are now landlocked, and we are looking for different locations, and we went to our staff, and we said, where would you like us to move? And they said, we want to stay in Dublin. And I said, why? And they said, well, they're from Mount Sterling, Ohio, Bellefontaine, Ohio, Grove City, and they all travel here every day for work, and they wanted to keep the company together. So having said that, we went out looking, and we have found a place that's about twice as large as our current office space. It's 5555 Park Center, the old Xerox building by the Marriott. And it's just a great location and a great space for our company. And our company works with nursing homes in 37 states. We represent 1,700 nursing homes and help them work with their managed care and short-term rehab. That's what we do on the administrative side.
Good. Great.
Great. Very good. Yeah, we're all familiar with the space and glad that you're going to be filling it. We appreciate that and hopeful for expansion in the future. Any other questions, comments? Very good. Mr. Maurer. I'm sorry, Mr. Maurer, he's signed up to speak. Thank you.
When you in the city here, interviewed this client, did you ask for any testimonials from patients in the long care and the long-term and acute care service? Any testimonials from any patients who responded to your work, or any denunciations?
Mr. Maurer, given that they represent 1,700 organizations and so forth, I'm not sure that's practical, but Mr. Cleary, I don't know if you can respond to that.
Directly, the answer is no, but as the mayor alluded to, company has an excellent reputation, has been very successful right here in Dublin. So our main objective was to keep that success going here in Dublin.
Yeah, well, my question is because that'd be an acid test of the operation. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Maurer. No other questions? Ann, if you'd call for the vote, please.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan? Mr. Nzikzer?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Salee?
Yes.
Mr. Gerber?
Yes.
And Mayor Lucklider?
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hoffman.
Thank you.
Ordinance 94-13.
Amending Chapter 35 of the Codified Ordinances to revise the fee and service charge revenue cost comparison system, establishing a schedule of fees and service charges for City of Dublin services, and declaring an emergency.
Thank you.
Ordinance 9413 establishes the fee schedule for the 2014 calendar year based on the results of the annual cost of services study. As you know, this year we completed the study using the Consumer Price Index of 1.8% as the basis for the update. The CPI was applied to the unit cost of the service and rounded to the nearest $10 in most cases. About 25% of the fees increased using the CPI. The fee modifications and new services were detailed in the memos attached to the ordinance in your packet. Staff is recommending the full study be completed next year so that the city's fees stay in line with associated costs. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Questions? Comments?
Just say thanks for answering my questions on the columbarium.
Absolutely.
I had just one question. I may be pulling the wrong information. Something in our packet, and I thought it was the Cablestone Lane, but I could be wrong on which one it was, discussed that one of the reasons they didn't do a different kind of evaluation was that the service fee didn't support that. And now I can't quickly find which one it was. Do you recall what I'm talking about? Or does anybody else recall what I'm talking about? And I just, because obviously my concern was that if this was something we ought to be doing, then it would seem like this is the time to, maybe doing your full study next year would
Right.
come about. We would find whichever one I'm not finding
Yeah,
tonight, that this should be something that I maybe can find and make sure you know about the staff report saying that the reason they don't do this more comprehensive review is because the fee structure doesn't suggest that it pays for it.
Absolutely.
So next year, that's something that you'd
Okay.
find out, I suppose, by doing your full
Yeah,
study.
I think that was in the report that the engineering staff prepared earlier this year or last year with regard to the private streets and the inspections that we do. We do more of a compliance instead of a
Right.
quality control inspection. And so there was some reference to the fee that's charged. So we can look at that.
So that's just something for your 2014 review to consider. Thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Maurer?
Oh,
This is the smallest question of the evening. This relates to the sandwich boards, on the streets. And now, I guess if this legislation passes, you charge $80 for any other sandwich board. Is that because a sort of toleration limit has been reached? And the areas are getting too full of sandwich boards and making progress in.
No, it's based upon the time and the review that goes into the sandwich boards and what they look like, where they're located.
Yeah.
And a lot of it has to do with safety and placement of the signs and making sure that we have good information and that the users of the signs know and understand what their limitations are.
Yeah, right. But if I read this correctly, there have been sandwich boards, say, up to this time. Any that now apply to put up a sandwich board And I gather those who've put them up to this point have not paid anything. But if any appear now, or applicants appear now, they have to pay for them.
Any new sandwich
New
boards,
ones.
yes.
Is that because the toleration limit is high, that is, they're getting too many?
No, it's just from the standpoint of making sure that there is a process and a review of where what the boards look like and where they're placed. And a lot of it has to do with safety, to make sure
Yeah.
the locations are not blocking sidewalks
Yeah.
and things like that.
Well, does this look back on the ones that are there?
They were grandfathered in as far as the fee. They had to go through the process of getting a permit so that we have the information on hand and it's been evaluated. They just weren't charged a fee.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mallard, I think to add to that, this is not a limitation. I mean, there's not a defined number of sandwich boards that are permitted, and this is the cost of the regulation. This is the cost of the city's oversight, if you will, the policing, if you will, for the reasons that the city manager mentioned. It's not about tolerance.
Okay.
They're allowed.
So those who've put up sandwich boards up to now are lucky. They didn't have to pay anything.
Well, I suppose.
Right? Yeah, okay.
Okay?
Wish I'd put mine up.
All right. We have a motion to treat this legislation as an emergency. Is there a second?
Second.
And if you call for a vote on the emergency?
Vice Mayor Salee.
Yes.
Mayor Lucklider.
Yes.
Mr. Gerber.
Yes.
Mr. Keenan. Mr. Reiner.
Yes.
Ms. Janice Zerker.
Yes.
Thank you. And on the ordinance, please?
Mr. Reiner.
Yes.
Mayor Lucklider.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Salee.
Yes.
Mr. Gerber.
Yes.
Mr. Keenan. Ms. Janice Zerker.
Yes.
Great, thank you. Ordinance 95-13.
Amending Chapter 51, establishing user fees and capacity charges for the sanitary sewer system and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. Ms. Moulin.
Yes, this evening we are bringing forward an ordinance to change the sewer fees charged. As you are aware, as part of our CIP process every year, we look at the fund balances within our water and sewer funds, and we roughly estimated that period of time what we would anticipate changes moving forward for the upcoming years. Our goal, as you are aware, in both the water and sewer funds is to maintain a fund balance of 25% of the system value. Water has been very close to that amount, and between 2014 through 2022, when we look ahead, we anticipate that that fund balance will remain anywhere between 20 and 23%. So relatively healthy, and for that reason, we do propose no changes to the sewer fees. The sewer fund, on the other hand, is not quite as healthy, as you are aware, due to the significant debt that has been incurred by the fund, namely the construction of the Upper Scioto West Branch Interceptor. This debt payment is approximately $1.35 million annually and goes through 2018. So the period of time between now and 2018 is critical. As a result of this debt burden and the existing fund balance within the sewer fund, staff is recommending a 25-cent per 1,000 cubic feet, or MCF, increase in both 2014 and 2015. Based on the significant potential development that could occur within the city within the next 2 years, we feel that it's appropriate to just do a 2-year rate increase as opposed to a 3 as part of our CIP, and continually we look at those fund balances, but it will give us an opportunity to see what development has incurred that might generate substantial revenue that could help minimize future rate increases between now and 2018. So with that, I will entertain any questions that you may have.
Questions or comments?
We've been through this already, but.
No, I think she did it.
Of course, obviously, our situation is going to improve with respect to the sewer dramatically in 4
Yes.
years. So that'll hopefully look a whole lot better and more closely resemble the water fund.
That's our goal.
That's our goal.
Okay.
All right, very good. If we could have a motion to treat this legislation as an emergency.
So moved.
Is there a second? Thank you. And if you call for a vote on the emergency?
Mr. Keenan.
Yes.
Ms. Janice Zerker.
Yes.
Mr. Reiner.
Yes.
Mr. Gerber.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Salee.
Yes.
Mayor Lucklider.
Yes. And on the ordinance, please?
Mr. Gerber.
Yes.
Mr. Keenan.
Yes.
Mayor Lucklider.
Yes.
Ms. Janice Zerker.
Yes.
Mr. Reiner.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Salee.
Yes.
Very good, thank you. Moving on to the introduction of ordinances, the first reading of ordinances, beginning with ordinance 96-13.
Adopting and enacting a supplement to the Code of Ordinances for the City of Dublin, Ohio.
I'll introduce it.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is just a housekeeping measure to codify the legislation that was passed from July 1 of this year. And we are asking, it's not listed in the ordinance, but we are asking that it be passed as an emergency to update the code.
Okay. Any questions, comments? Hearing none, if we could have a motion to dispense with the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. And if you call for the vote.
Ms. Janice Zerker?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Mayor Lucklider?
Yes.
Mr. Gerber?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan? Vice Mayor Salee?
Yes.
And on the ordinance, please.
Mr. Keenan? Mayor Lucklider?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Salee?
Yes.
Mr. Gerber?
Yes.
And Ms. Janice Zerker?
Yes.
Very good. Thank you. Ordinance 97-13.
Amending the annual appropriations for the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2013.
I'll introduce it.
Thank you. Ms. Mula?
Yes, this is our final appropriation amendment for the year and really just cleans up accounts that need additional funding. Your staff memo outlines the requests, and I would be happy to provide any additional details.
Yes.
I'm sure it was here, but for some reason I couldn't find it. What is the grand total of the request, and what is the percent of that total against our total budget, really?
It's not there,
Okay,
so you
good.
didn't miss it. Obviously, this is broken down by fund.
Right.
Our grand total in the general fund is $478,200, which, when you consider our general fund budget of well over $56 million.
Okay.
is-
It's minus, right?
Yes. And then the other ones are, broken down fund by fund. Many of them are, just if you recall, last month we brought forward a capital appropriation that appropriated all the TIF funds. We try to catch as much as we can during that period of time, but inevitably things come forward. So some of them might be small because we did the majority of them last month.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? We're also dispensing with public hearing on this as well. Could I have a motion to that effect?
Second.
Thank you. And if you call for a vote, please.
Vice Mayor Salee?
Yes.
Mayor Lucklider?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan?
Yes.
Ms. Janice Zerker?
Yes.
Mr. Gerber?
Yes.
And on the ordinance, please.
Ms. Janice Zerker?
Yes.
Mr. Gerber?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan?
Yes.
Mayor Lucklider?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Salee?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Ordinance 98-13.
Establishing appropriations based on the 2014 operating budget of the City of Dublin, State of Ohio for the fiscal year ending December 31, 2014.
I'll introduce it.
Thank you. Ms.
This
Mula.
ordinance simply appropriates the funds that you previously approved this evening as part of the 14 operating budget.
Okay. Questions or comments? Hearing none, if I could have a motion to dispense with public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. And if you call for the vote.
Ms. Janice Zerker?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Salee?
Yes.
Mayor Lucklider?
Yes.
Mr. Gerber?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
And on the ordinance.
Mr. Gerber?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan?
Yes.
Mayor Lucklider?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Salee?
Yes.
Ms. Janice Zerker?
Yes.
Very good, thank you. Ordinance 99-13.
Amending Section 2, Wage and Salary Structure Administration, Paragraph A of Ordinance 7306, Compensation Plan for Non-Union Personnel for the purpose of deleting, incorporating certain job classification titles and corresponding pay grades as addressed in the 2014 operating budget and declaring an emergency.
I'll introduce it.
Thank you. Mr. Wagner.
Mayor, members of council, this is sort of a relatively routine update of classification and the pay grades. There are two additional issues really to note. We've added domestic partner and part of the immediate family definition for our health care and other leave benefits, and then there's a reduction in the amount of compensatory time that employees can bank in their leave banks for operational reasons. Other than that, I can glad to answer any questions you might have.
Questions or comments?
I would just like to say that I'm glad that the city has finally added the domestic partner language. I think that we're a little behind there from some other of the government and private sector companies. And I was pleased to see, just because I think it's an administrative nightmare currently, the HR payroll system that you're going to be implementing. I think that should be really improve efficiency for the staff that work on that.
Thank you.
That looked great.
I'm sure Tim agrees.
Absolutely.
And everyone else? Anybody else? We had a motion to dispense with public hearing and treat this as an emergency.
So moved.
Second.
Thanks. And if you would call for the vote, please.
Mr. Gerber?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Salee?
Yes.
Mayor Lucklider?
Yes.
Ms. Janice Zerker?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan?
Yes.
And on the ordinance?
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Mr. Gerber?
Yes.
Ms. Janice Zerker?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan?
Yes.
Mayor Lucklider?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Salee?
Yes.
Very good. Thank you. Ordinance 100-13.
Authorizing the city manager to execute necessary conveyance documentation to acquire 7.54 acres more or less fee simple interest located east of North High Street and west of the Scioto River from Crawford Hoyne for park land and right-of-way and declaring an emergency.
I'll introduce it.
Thank you. Mr. Fogler.
Thank you. Council's aware there's been an active planning process to identify parkland along the river on both the east and west side of the river near the historic district. Surveys done of citizens last spring identified additional open space and parks along rivers as among the highest green space alternatives. Presenting to you tonight an alternative or an opportunity for the acquisition of 7.5 acres, over 6 acres of which will be parkland and complete for all but one owner's parcel of a little over an acre. All of the land identified in Dublin on the west side of the river north of 161 within our corporate limits. The property abuts the Kilberry property that added over 4 acres of parkland several months back when council took action to approve that. This land also provides needed right-of-way both for fee simple ownership to the North High right-of-way, but also will provide, as the planning is beginning to identify, the opportunity to extend North Riverview north of North Street so that an edge to that new park space with a public road can be established. In total, this provides acquisition of 7.54 acres from two different existing parcels of record. It actually constitutes 3 different acquisitions from those 2 parcels. We are recommending that council approve this by emergency language. The emergency is necessitated by the purchase agreements, which call for closings to occur by December 15th of this year. The purchase price is $2.4 million. It's about $50,000 less than the appraised value as prepared by the Robert Weiler Company. We're happy to answer any questions council may have regarding this acquisition.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? I have a motion to dispense with this. To dispense with public hearing and treat this
So moved.
legislation. Thank you. Second?
Second.
And if you call for a vote?
Mayor Lucklider?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Salee?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Mr. Gerber?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan?
Yes.
Ms. Janice Zerker?
Yes.
And on the ordinance?
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Ms. Janice Zerker?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan?
Yes.
Mr. Gerber?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Salee?
Yes.
Mayor Lucklider?
Yes. Thank you. Moving on to resolutions, beginning with Resolution 73-13.
Authorizing the city manager to enter into a contract for the provision of legal services.
I'll introduce it.
Thank you.
This resolution provides for the 2-year extension of our existing contract with Steve Smith with Frost Brown Todd for the city's legal services at the same rate that we're currently paying, and we recommend adoption tonight.
Questions or comments? Hearing none, Ann, if you could call for the vote?
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Mayor Lucklider?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Salee? Mr. Gerber?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan?
Yes.
Ms. Janice Zerker?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Resolution 74-13.
Accepting the lowest and best bid for Emerald Parkway Phase 8 project.
I'll introduce it.
Thank you. Mr. Hammersmith.
Mayor and members of council, I have the pleasure this evening of presenting the bid acceptance resolution for the final phase of Emerald Parkway, this being the 5,500-foot section that extends from Riverside Drive, crosses Bright Road, and will terminate at Billingsley Creek, just south of where Phase 5A terminated several years ago, south of Hard Road. Included in this last section of Emerald Parkway will be a multi-lane modern roundabout at Bright Road, where Emerald Parkway will intersect it. We'll also have bicycle and pedestrian facilities. We'll have on-roadway share roads. We'll also have an asphalt shared use path on both sides of Emerald Parkway, just as we do presently along existing sections. Additionally, existing overhead utilities will be buried or relocated underground at Bright Road, where they are presently overhead. And then furthermore, the electric power will be buried along the entire length of Emerald Parkway, and that is going to be performed by AEP, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a second, about the cost sharing on that. This project is going to be the culmination of 18 years worth of effort, starting in 1996, and a $62 million investment. That's total cost, design, acquisition, utilities, and construction. The construction itself is just under $42 million, for a total length of 5.6 miles along the entire length, connecting Sawmill Road to the north all the way down to Tuttle Crossing Boulevard on the south, and certainly providing improved mobility throughout the community, not only for our corporate residents in our neighborhoods, but those living outside, and certainly reducing congestion on adjoining roadways themselves. Just so you're familiar, along the length of the project, just as luck would have it, the laser pointer doesn't work. And when you begin at Riverside Drive, we worked with 18 property owners along the route of Phase A, 15 different owners over the last several years to acquire right-of-way in the amount of about just almost 14 acres of right-of-way and 4.6 acres of easement for a total cost of just under $4.4 million. Certainly we are done with that acquisition, we're pleased to say. All that is secured, and you'll begin to see not only construction of the roadway itself, but relocation of utilities up along Bright Road starting very soon, and actually that portion will be completed in February. Aside from all the details of the project itself, more importantly, this section of Emerald Parkway just helps us open up 115 acres of prime commercial real estate. One of the last segments of commercial real estate with I-270 frontage, the last in the region. That really translates into approximately 1 million square feet of premier office or Class A office. So we're very pleased to be able to have that in our inventory and be able to offer that to corporate residents so that they can share an Emerald Parkway address just the same as Cardinal Health and IGS Energy, CareWorks, Delta Energy, BMI, Federal Credit Union, CenturyLink, JP Morgan, Chase, and IBM, and several others. On November 21st, we opened 6 bids for the project. The engineer's estimate for this segment of Emerald Parkway was $11 million. Of those 6 bids, our lowest and best bid was submitted by the George Eigel Company. Their bid, as submitted, was $7,743,856.11. Very competitive bids, a little bit of distance between them and a second bidder, yet very competitive. Staff anticipates construction to begin on this segment of Emerald Parkway probably in early January, and will continue for just under a year with the expectation that it will be completed and open to traffic November 20th of next year. Bright Road will remain open throughout the duration of the project, so those living along the Grand Eclipse area and along Macbeth Drive will remain, access will be maintained to their properties. We are going to work to limit basically cut through traffic on Bright Road. We're going to make a connection from Bright Road early in the project over to Emerald Parkway to the north, which was the 5B section I mentioned previously. But throughout the duration of the project, they will have access, and then shortly thereafter, we will complete the roundabout for the project. So with that, on behalf of staff, and really in particular those staff members that have been here since the beginning of Emerald Parkway with full support of City Council and encouragement, but really in particular for Marcia Grigsby Ken Richardson, who has really led all the designs for engineering since 1996, and certainly Terry Fogler and Dana and many others. We are making a recommendation to award the contract to the George J. Eigel Company in the amount of their bid, which is the $7 million figure I mentioned previously. Our experience with the George Eigel Company has been more than favorable, especially on 2 projects this summer, the Highland Croy and Brand roundabout project, and then just most recently the Kaufman and Brand roundabout project. They did exceptional work, very well executed, very well coordinated, and certainly very timely in their work. So with that, we are pleased to make that recommendation, and I'll be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Questions, comments?
Hallelujah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that, well, I know after the original opening of Emerald Parkway or Emerald Bridge or whatever we called it at the time, we said we wouldn't have any more of those parties, but I do think next November we should have a party because 19 years by then will have passed, and Kathy definitely needs to be invited back for that. But it shows that we have to move slowly, I guess. But even in the phases that we have already completed, which is, certainly the majority of them, the traffic change has been phenomenal, really, and I think it continues to demonstrate by good infrastructure and good planning how you can move thousands of people through your community successfully, really. And what a great opportunity now for economic development to open up that fabulous land that will be shown from 270.
I think it's noteworthy that we, unlike many communities, put the infrastructure in and then let the development come. And that's been a hallmark of I think, our success over the years as well. You see too many places that the development comes, and then you have a mess. In fact, we had an applicant here tonight that's moving here for that very reason.
Yeah.
So thank you, Paul, and thank you, staff, and Ken Richardson for your work, and everybody else.
Yeah, I would just like to add, I mean, this is pretty monumental. It's amazing that we finally have gotten to this point. But people like Ken Richardson that do the design, I mean, it's amazing the stuff that Ken does that you don't realize and you kind of take for granted. But he should be commended for all of the work that he's put in on Emerald Parkway, and a lot of the reason our roadways look the way they do and operate the way they do is because of his excruciating detail that he puts in. Sometimes we get a little frustrated with Ken, but the results are out in the field and are very much appreciated. And some of the other people that you don't see or hear a lot from are the inspectors. And we have some inspectors that have been probably involved in all of the different phases. And the job that they do is amazing to protect our interest and make sure things are built the way they're supposed to. So people that don't normally get to be here or hear from deserve a lot of credit for Emerald Parkway and the way it looks today.
And I remember working with you many, many years ago across from Cardinal where the little bump comes out where Kilauea is now. You remember that? And then they made some major concessions to get that done. But I think as you look back on it, it turned out very, very well. So.
Thank you, Ken.
Well, since Ken is here, I think he should come up and get on camera.
I think he should.
So,
absolutely.
Come here, Ken.
We know who.
It is your night.
So we know either who to
This
blame or praise.
is your life.
Yay!
So are you announcing your retirement November 21st?
No, I'm not. But I'm very glad to see this last section finally making it. We call it the Sawmill Kaufman Connector or Kaufman Sawmill Connector, and then there's a consultant hired to name the road. So everybody knows it now as Emerald Parkway, but it's been a long, long journey. Glad to see it coming to a close.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
That's great. Thanks a lot. Okay, Ian, if you call for the vote, please.
Mr. Keenan?
Yes.
Ms. Genesee Zerker?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Mayor Lechleiter?
Yes.
Mr. Gerber?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Salee?
Yes.
Great, thank you all.
Thank you.
moving on to that part of our agenda designated as other. This is an applicant request to take from a previous tabling ordinance 70-13. Do we need to read this? Okay. Mr.
Do it on the 27th. I'm out of the country on the 13th.
I'm sorry?
Oh, the 20.
Yeah, so your second.
January.
Yeah, actually, I don't know whether to say we're happy that you're going to be out of the country, but yeah, we were going to suggest that we do it, if not then, even in the first meeting in February. Does it matter?
Whatever. I like to get it done because they'd like to get the building leased, but.
Staff, do you have a preference for the second meeting in January, the first meeting in February?
I don't know that we have a preference. Either one would be fine.
Okay.
Yeah, 27th, fine. Yeah.
All right.
You want a motion to that, or do we
Yes,
need one?
yeah.
I'll make a motion that we approve this request to remove ordinance 70-13 from the table and schedule second reading public hearing for January 27th.
Second. Great. And if you call for the vote?
Vice Mayor Salee.
Yes.
Mayor Lucklider.
Yes.
Ms. Janice Zerker.
Yes.
Mr. Reiner.
Yes.
Mr. Gerber.
Yes.
And Mr. Keenan.
Yes.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry you had to wait so
You had us sit here all night for that? Well, have a great holiday. Oh, now the truth comes out.
Next up is a follow-up report regarding the Bridge Street District Community Forum. Mr. Fogler.
Thank you. Just a few brief comments on the packet of materials that we gave you this evening, kind of a little context. If council recalls, you had a work session on September 16th, at which time you asked and directed staff to begin to engage Planning Commission and the public more broadly in both kind of the public improvement planning that was happening for the River Corridor portion of Bridge Street, as well as some of the emerging private improvements. The October 22nd public forum was the first major foray in that effort. You have a kind of a summary of materials that were presented, but more importantly, the feedback from the public, comments, and comments obtained subsequently online through some of the survey information for folks either who didn't want to fill the information out at that event or who subsequently reviewed the information online. Per your direction, we also presented the private development proposals in an informal context to begin to get Planning Commission comment and review. You'll actually now have the benefit of the adopted minutes of the Planning Commission in this packet since they took action last Thursday to do that. I think the comments I heard back from the developer, designer, and staff were that they were very appreciative of the P&Z comments and found them extremely constructive in terms of informing next levels of design. One of the things that I think we indicated to council we would bring forth to you after these portions of the events was some thoughts with regard to going forward on public engagement. And I think there were several contexts for that. One was just to continue to increase the awareness, although there's, when you see some of the survey results, folks who are very familiar or somewhat familiar or not familiar, we still need to do more to get word out with regard to the what, the why, and the rationale, and at the same time to seek continued input from our citizens on this matter. I think among the things you will see in the report that we presented to you this evening are a series of strategies. One is to certainly keep up with the websites. We've added and will continue to maintain a frequently asked question section that will stay current and continue to respond to questions from citizens so that can be a first source as well. One of the ideas that emerged from this input that you directed us to do last September is that a series of brief educational videos on some of the topics, for example, roundabouts, and other some of these kind of key initiatives, some of the traffic and other things that are ongoing would be extremely helpful to kind of summarize at least some of the main common questions that are asked, and folks can then seek more detailed responses from staff if those aren't sufficient. So one of the things we're working with our communications folks on is put together a series of what initially would probably be 5 to 8 brief videos on some of the key subjects, parks, other related activities, so that folks could kind of see the complete planning and rationale and issues and how some of the proposed issues would be addressed or solutions would be addressed, and provide opportunities for additional citizen input. The other thing that we've suggested in there is that for all the various community groups around Dublin who are seeking speakers or would like more information, that we make staff available and do much more substantial outreach to let folks know we are here to provide information on both Bridge Street projects, initiatives, and respond to questions to continue the educational effort moving forward. We think the effort of having Planning and Zoning Commission undertake the informal reviews on these projects is helpful, and we recommend that that continue on this as well, because it gives him feedback at an early stage, not just to the developers and to the public and others, but also for council at early levels of these projects that we think is beneficial. We think for some of the initiatives, some community forums of various types will continue to be needed and are beneficial as well. And we've also suggested including at least a monthly session in your council meeting that provides updates probably on some of the topical issues that are emerging from these efforts, so that council can stay engaged and up to speed. And through this public forum, the public can have an opportunity to see these meetings and be kept up to date, and again, ask questions, raise concerns, or also benefit from those regular updates. So in terms of some of the going forward strategies, we would recommend that council consider those and modify, endorse, or suggest alternatives or additions as you see appropriate. Another element that we wanted to summarize briefly was we gave brief overviews in these public forums with regard to the preliminary engineering for the public projects that are being advanced in the river corridor that were added to the capital plan earlier this fall. Within about 30, 60 days, we're going to have, in effect, what are 30% complete construction drawings for most of those improvements. That's what preliminary engineering would essentially produce. Among the benefits of that will be a far more refined cost estimate than was produced at the conceptual level, so we'll be able to give you much better numbers than were secured before. And there will also be the ability to talk of issues of phasing, some of the efficiencies, coordination, and it'll suggest some recommendations for moving forward. And I would like to use some of these regular monthly updates to council as a way to provide some of the things we've learned from that preliminary engineering process, get your feedback, and for those things that you would like to undertake more detailed work sessions, then you can choose the topics and issues that you would like to do that with. One of the things we've heard recently from some public comments are concerns that traffic maintenance plans have been put together with regard to these public improvements. For example, that the bridge would be closed for a year for the construction of the roundabout. One thing we want to make real clear is no traffic maintenance plans are being put together as part of the preliminary engineering drawings. That's not to say that the folks who are analyzing this haven't begun to identify the issues associated with the construction of that roundabout. And what we'd like to do as part of these regular updates with council in the first couple months of next year is begin to orient council and share with you some of the things we've learned regarding some of those issues that relate to phasing, relate to maintenance of traffic, relate to some efficiencies that can accrue from doing projects in certain ways, as well as update better cost information with this level of preliminary engineering. So we think that would provide an extra opportunity to include some of those as part of the regular updates to council that we've recommended in this report. With regard to the private projects, one of the things that we've noted and think is a good practice to start now is that we believe for the major projects that were presented at that forum, which include the Crawford Hoeing projects on the east side and the Jerry Bird project on the west side of the river, that the next phase needs to be that there's a kind of a development agreement framework that the city finds acceptable to know that these projects are in fact feasible before they continue down an extensive development review and approval process, a formal process. Basically, if there's not a development arrangement and agreement that the city and the developer have a comfort level with that addresses the gaps that exist in these projects, we think that kind of development review process is premature. Obviously, one other major variable in finalizing those kind of development agreements is the city finalizing its agreements with the Dublin City School District, and we continue to have constructive discussions and are hopeful that those will get resolved. But we think it's important that there be this measure of financial feasibility and project feasibility at a phase for a project that's being tested early on before it goes through all the final rigors of formal development review. So in summary, what I think we'd like is if you have additional feedback with regard to the public engagement processes that we've presented to you tonight. Be happy to consider those or additional input or feedback on that going forward. The overview of outcomes from the preliminary engineering, we'd like to give presentations in the first couple months of 2014 to you to kind of share with you what we have learned through those processes, and it has been very informative, and we think you will find that information and the benefits of having looked at that so comprehensively very enlightening. Issues of alignment, design, related issues, cost estimates, phasing, some of the things that will inform long-term traffic maintenance, like duration of construction, those kind of things we'd like to share with you. And then some of the going forward considerations and what it suggests for moving forward on some of the projects I think we'd like to present to you as well. And with regard to the private development agreement frameworks, just see if you endorse that concept of kind of vetting those and having at least a basic level of agreement along general development terms before things get engaged in the formal development review process would be helpful. Be happy to answer any questions council may have.
I'd just like to say thank you, Terry. This is really a very complex undertaking and one of the largest ones that I've seen in the country, and requires a lot of skill, and the staff's done an excellent job in supporting you on this. And it's a rather risky undertaking, but I think with the kind of effort you and our people put in this, you've reduced the risk and the initiative, and I think you're going to create something that's going to make our city fantastic for the next 30 to 50 years. And I know that, as well as my colleagues, that a whole bunch of this has to be resolved. There's a lot of design issues in this and engineering issues that are going to come up. And I know sometimes we all get premature throwing questions at you that can't be resolved yet at this stage. I think, but we're all behind you in this endeavor. So again, congratulations on the effort and the engagement of the citizens. And I think from what I could see, the majority of the people, and I mean a huge majority of the people, are really excited about this. And it's something I think our city really needs for both the young people and the seniors in our community are looking forward to seeing this thing happen. So just want to give you our support and our thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, John. Rick?
Yeah. Terry, I appreciate this report. I spent a few hours over the weekend going through it, and I think I'd like to take another few weeks to continue my study. So I'm not ready to opine on everything, but with respect to the questions you're asking this evening, you know, I think it's a great idea for the Planning and Zoning Commission to continue with these informals. I think there's a lot of good feedback between them and staff and more importantly the developer. So I would encourage that at every level. In fact, maybe even when it comes to, if some of these initially go to ART, maybe even a little bit of informal there too. So I think I'd like to utilize P&Z to serve as the gatekeeper, if you will, with respect to the informals. I think that's a very good process. You know, we've had a lot of people here over the last month come up here to speak to us and say, well, I haven't heard about this, which, you know, a lot of us scratch our head and wonder, well, how could that be? But, you know, I was kind of thinking, maybe it's like when we had a couple of those 5-mile runs earlier this summer where, you know, I mean, some people, even in my neighborhood, had no clue. So we had to put some big signs out on the roadway. So, you know, I don't know where everybody gets their information. Some people read the paper. Some of us, you know, go on the internet. Some, I guess, maybe just read it on the street somewhere. So, you know, I think we need to encourage people to the extent that we can. And, you know, we're not their keeper, obviously, but we need to get them to, you know, engage in this process. So I don't know how we can better do that. I know some people aren't involved with homeowner associations, so I know we've been collecting some of those names so that we can disseminate things to them. So the more of that we can do, obviously, I think we're all on the same page to do that. I'm most intrigued, and I'm ready to opine on this, is this development agreement that you're talking about. I'd like to know more about that.
Sure.
You know, we have a code, obviously, but we also need, you know, I mean, I recognize this is a massive undertaking, and you got to have that certain amount of density, not density, but mass, critical mass, so that this can work. Without that critical mass, that it's going to be just little spotches of buildings here and there. So
I think with regard to the development agreement, most of these developers now, based upon the city's past policies of using TIFs and other kinds of incentives, are trying to learn our underwriting criteria so that they can apply those to their projects, because all of these projects have gaps. The city has to say, we're comfortable doing that, we're not comfortable doing this, and what are the levels of risk associated with those. So some of it relates to TIFs, some of it just relates to other business terms. Do you want that parking to be public or private? Do you not want to worry about that structure? Should these streets be public or private? Who builds what, even if it's eventually public roads and streets? So what we want to make sure is, as these projects have enough, and some developments, this can happen very early in the conceptual stage, where developers are very good at kind of saying, here's my general pro forma, here's where it looks like the gaps. Of course, we're going to have to understand what the nature of our agreement with the school district is to know what's possible on our side. But here's the kind of structure that makes sense. Here's the other kinds of things in this partnership we're looking to accomplish. Do they make sense or not? And if they're deal killers, better to know it at that point than to run everyone through the highly detailed development review process.
Well, that makes a lot of sense to me. The one thing I'm trying to visualize here is that, you know, at the initial stage where P&Z is talking about informal, so that's where you're kind of getting the feedback on the vision, the aesthetics, and all those sort of things, and then we're going to look at the code and try to plug in, you know, A to A and connect them all up. So that part's that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about the infrastructure issues, the financial things.
Yep. If you would remembered for the Edwards project in Dublin Village Center, it would have been the basic structure of here's what's being sought, here's what we're looking at in terms of parking assistant, street assistant, here's what we'd recommend based on our normal underwriting criteria. Does this make sense to you, council? And if it meets your tests, then it gives you the basis to move it to the next levels here.
Yeah, that seems to make a lot of sense to me, Terry. And I think obviously, you know, an update of some sort or another, you know, a month, every meeting or on city council, I think is a good idea. So,
Great.
Appreciate
Very
your
much.
efforts.
Appreciate the input.
Terry, I thought maybe you'd had a conversation with that Michelle Kerr from Oxford before the meeting, because she used a lot of the very words that we have worked on this project for so long to develop, and specifically she talked about the associates and the business, the being able to go to the restaurants and the businesses in the area, the entertainment. She even used the word walkability. And we've heard these words for the last 3 years and so forth. So we see how important it is to just, that's one example of a business that just happened to be here today. And it's going to be equally important as we strive to fulfill one of our major obligations, which is revenue, economic development, to be able to pay for the services that we provide day in, day out, week in, week out, year in, year out. So, yeah, this is great. We're moving in the right direction. There's always going to be some naysayers at the end of the day, but we're going to keep plugging forward, and I thank
Actually,
you.
there was an article in Wall Street Journal, I think it was last week, wasn't it, that companies in Silicon Valley, in order to attract people, they're moving
Back to
a
San
satellite office up to, you know, San Francisco, or other companies to downtown Atlanta and the like, to attract the younger workers. So it was actually a very good, well-written article.
Thank you.
Tim?
Yes.
In addition to what has already been commented on, and one thing I think that was interesting that you bring up, Mike, about the Oxford Consulting Company is that we actually did some upgrading in the metro area, and we see that they're going into one of our original corporate areas, and yet that upgrading is going to be answers to the questions that their employees were looking for, the kinds of environment they were looking for, with sidewalks and lighting and all that kind of thing. Several things did interest me in my first, like Rick, I'm glad everything's in one notebook now. That was very helpful, and I'm sure I'm going to be making reference to this on a continual basis. But there seem to be some general themes that people have written us emails about, people have come here in front of us, and certainly was demonstrated in various forms and ways articulated in this notebook. One that a number of people mentioned, the disappointment in the lack of interesting architect for the East Side. And this is our one and only chance to really do something outstanding, unique, and making a statement. So I think that we certainly need to look at that issue and not just be a humdrum and kind of architect and build out that we're looking at. Parking was repeatedly brought up, and at your meeting that you had a couple weeks ago. The road location was an interesting one that we've also heard about on several times, and it's in here. And I know you've explained to us, or Paul has, that the location is based on really the engineering capacity of the land and the way the land is, it goes there and the rocks and all those kind of things. But we're either not, we haven't found the right way to articulate that apparently, because there's not, there seems to be some numbers of people who believe that the size of the park is being dictated by where we've selected to put the road. Well, there is, there is a relationship, but there's reasons for the relationship. And if the road has to be where we've stated it is, then is there something that we can do that really will build the park larger than we're currently at least showing it? And I think there are other ways we could do that. That we probably have because we have talked over the last 2 years and in our meetings we've held here and in other public meetings about a large park and, a meandering kind of thing, and where public can have concerts or, larger gatherings, and yet visually it's not looking like that's going to be what this park is going to be able to have. And people move here, people stay here, people come here because of the green space and the parks that we already have. So if we just have another regular park, it won't be quite as interesting as some dramatic statement of the use of a park.
I think that's one of those elements that we think a video would lend itself very well. How big is that park? What can you do there? What's informed its size? I think there's also some misperceptions that at some point a much bigger park was proposed or planned. The area where the park and the road now, if you remember the acquisition that council authorized and was made last December of 2012, that was kind of based on the best thinking before we did all this detail. And we are within a little over an acre of hitting that on. So it's about an acre smaller than that 14 plus acres that was acquired, but it's very, very close to what was preliminarily thought for before. And there's lots of factors: the starting point of Riverside underneath 270, the roundabout, the maintenance of the bypass underneath 161, the slopes as you move up the hill, how high this road can be above a park without creating, because you still have to have intersections of John Shields Parkway and Dale where those roads come together if you're splitting them in the middle. But we can, I think, graphically through these videos help provide much better education. If council at the end of the day says we want something explored beyond that, you can certainly look at that, but we think the case will be made very strong that both it's a great park in terms of the opportunity and the space, but the rationale for why the negatives of making it bigger can be explained much more clearly than what we've done.
Terry, it's important to note that roundabout or that traffic correction at Riverside and 30 was going to have to be made at Bridge Street.
Regardless.
And regardless, I mean, that's an issue that we have to deal with. We've talked about it for a long time, and it's not really one's driving the other particularly. It's just that has to be done. And I saw one comment about, well, you need to push the road back, and if you look at the elevation change, there's not really a whole lot of space for that to go.
Yep.
You're on top of the other buildings, and secondly, from a design perspective and construction engineering, there's some real issues there with elevation changes rapidly going from the west to the east on that site. So.
And you have a bridge across the river as well, so the farther you push that up, you're creating a bridge that's going, this is not a pedestrian bridge, but the future.
But to Mary Lee's point, it's really about communication.
Yes.
And getting it out. And, did you mention or somebody about when we did the Tartan West and we had those drive-throughs? I think that's what you're alluding to.
Yeah, I think video, we can
That
actually use
video
graphics
was
and other
very
tools to
helpful
kind of
when we
show.
were reviewing that project. That could be really useful.
I think all the things that you articulated tonight are in the notebook about public education and engagement, and especially engagement, is really, really critical. It is hard for us to, all of us sitting up here, to hear people come today and say, this is the first time they heard of this. given that we live and breathe this and have for well over 3 years. But it does, and many of them that are saying this are people who are typically people who have historically been engaged. So that does tell us that people's lives change, they get busy, they're on to other things, but that they tune in at different ways and at different times in their lives. And so it's this continuous communication that is so important. I remember Ms. Fox said at a couple meetings ago when she was here listening, and out in the hall, she said to me, I don't think people are actually really opposed to it, but they want to feel engaged in it. And I think that that's always been a success of ours, is that in various ways, and times change, and we engage people differently in 2014 than we did in 1997. But it's this engagement and feeling that their opinion mattered and it was incorporated into the thinking is really critical to the ultimate success and the utilization of, and their encouragement of developers and others to build and live here and interact in our community. So I'd encourage us to really not put those comments aside, but to really take them seriously and use them. Thank you.
I think part of the issue also is it's sometimes the level of engagement when it's a planning process versus when it looks like it's starting to become real projects changes at times as well. And as the city's projects and the private projects begin to emerge, they take on a different flavor to them as well. But we hear you, and I think if you think of or have other ideas beyond those that we've laid out, that we will give you more detail along how these will unfold if these seem to be appropriate strategies that make sense to you.
I wanted to kind of, my thinking was kind of along the lines of Mary Lee's with the videos. John, you said something about it being risky, and I prefer to think of it as being bold, because I don't think it's necessarily risky. I think it's bold. I think it's very forward thinking, which is, what we've always been known for. I think, we've been living and breathing this for so many years, and we are all so excited about it. And, you have to step back and think, okay, well, if I, was coming at this at the beginning, and I was surprised, too, to hear people say, I haven't heard about this. We've had all these public forums. We had hundreds of people in attendance, more people than I've ever seen engaged that I can remember in any, we had to have them at Wendy's, for crying out loud, because we didn't have any city facilities big enough. So it's like, what, where are these people that haven't heard? But, obviously they're out there, and we need to engage them as well. Why things are where they are, I think, is really important to convey that, both the roadway location, how's that roundabout going to work? Because I keep hearing, oh, that's going to be horrible, that's going to be congested, it's going to bottle up everything, and I think, we all think it's going to move traffic better, because, that's our experience, it's what our engineers have said, but folks are not quite as trusting. One thing that hasn't been brought up was why are we TIFing anything? Why are we assisting in private development? I've had a couple people say, developers should pay the full freight, and if they can, if it's not economically feasible, then we shouldn't have anything to do with it. And obviously that is something that, we may disagree with, but I think it's really important to talk about, we have a very sophisticated community. I think folks understand, can understand these financial aspects if we explain it well enough. Again, also, why the density? Why do we, we're doing something in this 6% of our city that's so radically different. And it's, we're not really worried about density there, and in fact, encouraging density, but it's so different. And that is something that, I think folks need to get more comfortable with. I know I sometimes, we'll see a rendering and it'll say, 400 units. I think, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? We haven't had, a project like that in, in years. And had we suggested at any time in the past 10, 15, 20, we would have, all turned purple. So that's important to, how's that going to impact traffic? Why do we think it's okay? Why is it not going to impact our schools? What about, making our city too crowded? I've heard that, and, I always go back to, well, we all move here, and then we want the drawbridge to come up behind us. So that's something that we, have to fight, and obviously a growing community, a dynamic community, always changing, always evolving is really important in what we're striving for here. So, maybe there's more videos. I don't know. I was kind of disappointed that we had the first hearing at the Planning Commission, or the first sort of review at the Planning Commission, and we didn't have anybody speaking there, any public there to review that. And I thought, what a perfect opportunity. Our Planning Commission is the place. So whether we need to publicize those meetings or, whatever, I think every single way, I think we should not overestimate Facebook and Twitter in terms of communicating. I think there's an awful lot of folks that don't get their information that way. Obviously, our website's very well used, but the paper and, posters at the rec center, whatever, any way we can engage the community and let them know what's going on and that they need to go to the website and watch these videos or whatever, maybe have some videos running at the rec center. That might be, out here in City Hall as people wait for appointments. I don't know. But just, ways to get the word out, because I think we're all, so immersed in this, it's really hard to step back and explain things. So
great ideas. Thank you.
yeah. So anyway, thank you for putting this together. This is really, really helpful. I appreciate it, and all your time and your work and your talent. Thank you.
Terry, just a couple comments. First of all, with respect to the parkland, the riverfront parkland, I think that the fact that people are interested in it and expressing, concerns is actually should be viewed positively. I think it's a good sign that and as we all expect, people are excited about increasing accessibility to the park, to the riverfront, I should say. And also, I think it's important that, we emphasize the significant acquisitions, not only this one that everybody seems to be focusing on right across from Bridgepoint, but the acquisitions we've made on both the east and the west side, both to the south and more significantly to the north, up to Emerald Parkway and beyond. We're going to have a good accessibility and ownership, public ownership, all the way up to Amberley. So I think that's very significant. Obviously, we have Scioto Park, that we, it's been under our control, obviously, for a long time. On the parking, or I'm sorry, on the traffic side, a lot of questions with respect to traffic impact. The overall traffic impact, Riverside is busy, 161 is busy, Bridge Street is busy. How can that possibly be accommodated, going forward? So, to the extent that we can articulate that, I don't know whether it's worthwhile. The fact of the matter is, we would hope, that it would be, developed in some form, over time. Obviously, this is different from probably what a lot of people, including ourselves, might have envisioned 10, 15 years ago. But I know a lot of people seem to be struggling with the density that we're talking about, the presumption that, those people are going to own a certain number of cars, they're going to be using, both the existing and improved roadways and so forth, how they're going to get from point A to point B. So anyway, that's all. John?
Yeah, I just want to, say that, as a planner, Terry, I've been with you, backing you in this endeavor all the way. And, what we're building here is something we've all seen in Europe for the past 20 visits of every major downtown. You always wonder, how come these downtowns are so alive? And you're walking through them at 11 o'clock and people are all out strolling. But, the one thing I want you to keep in mind, and the one thing that worries me, is the commercial aspects of it. Our ability to draw in kind of restaurants, Grandview has a wonderful downtown. And I don't know if there's incentives, or we can work with the developers to get incentives for some of these. There's a lot of young craft-type people I'm running into who already have one bakery, or they want to open up a bakery or some kind of boutique meat store or something. And I don't know if there's any way for us to help facilitate these young people who want to be entrepreneurs and open something related to food or clothing or a boutique of some kind. So as you're doing this, and I think that synergy is really important in making this work. And I know some of the developers that approached us were very much interested in the apartment aspect of this, or maybe the condos. They weren't quite so interested and the 1-story lower level. So I think we're counting on you to see that that kind of mass is created that's going to make this thing really work and make it an exciting place to be. So, I mean, that's what we're shooting for here.
I think all very good input. I think the comments on architecture we heard from a variety of sources there. The designers early on said, realize we've just put massing together and started to drape some initial stuff, and these buildings will change a lot. So I think the feedback that they're getting, they're taking to heart. I think traffic engineering has been engaged in a study that builds upon the larger Bridge Street transportation study that was done a while back to start to look from a phasing perspective as these phases of development come on. What will they trigger in the way of improvements? And I think that will be one of the regular updates that we would like to provide council and kind of share with you what we're learning. Some of these improvements we've got to make, again, with or without Bridge Street. Some of them we need to understand the Bridge Street impacts and make sure that those are thought through as well. And I think in terms of merchandising plans and what we heard previously on retail and all the rest need to be carefully thought through. And I think those are the kind of things, as you start to look at a development agreement, are you satisfied that we've captured the essence of kind of what's being sought? So I think all these are good inputs that'll inform both us and developers who come forward in the future. And we'll try to take it to heart and provide a meaningful engagement and outreach strategy.
Oh, one other thing that we didn't mention was I was struck by how many folks that commented brought up the idea of transit.
Yep.
And I'm thinking just some, local way to get the people from Oxford Consulting across the river to those restaurants. We need to always keep that top of mind. I think that's a really exciting part of this plan and an important piece of it. I think about that trolley that runs around the downtown historic district on that one Thursday a month and how busy that is and how enjoyed that is. Something as simple as that.
Yep.
In key hours. I don't know how we do it, but we're Dublin, we'll figure it out. But that I think we can't lose sight of that.
We did hear that a lot. I think it's if we are successful with Bridge Street, it will be Dublin's most transit serviceable node. We need to make sure we have planned for it in the process.
Great.
Thank you all very much. Appreciate the input.
Thank you. Move on to staff comments.
The only thing I wanted to comment on tonight, there were several pieces of legislation that related to finance and different finance function, budgets, appropriations, and just to recognize Angel and all the finance staff for all of their efforts, because it really does take a lot of work to get that completed. And at the same time, debt was being issued, and there was a lot of effort that went into that. And there's a memo about getting our AAA confirmed, which is not something to take lightly, and there have been places that have had their rates, their ratings lowered. So just to recognize all the efforts over the last couple months. And with regard to the budget, we start having hearings back in August, September timeframe, and the amount of work that all the staff does to put together good requests and provide support. Like the chief mentioned, the request from last year resulted in the community impact unit. So all of staff does a really good job of providing good ideas and good requests for budgets. So just thanks to everybody for all their efforts. That's it.
Mr. Smith.
I wanted to take just a second and thank you all for entrusting your legal services to myself and our team and our law firm. I think it's 37 years and counting. I don't think I'm going to be here for another 37, but I do appreciate it. And on one other note, at the end of each year, the police department does a survey of our rest of liquor establishments to see if we want to object to any new liquor permits being renewed in February. That survey is then furnished to us, and we give a report to the Department of Commerce, and we find no problems in the city. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Mayor Lee, we have a finance chair report.
Okay. Wasn't sure there, liquor and Steve's renewal of us coming. Oh, okay. Yes, well, first of all, I'd like to thank the committee of Rick and Mike, and of course to Faye Gibson, who staffs us and keeps us on task. This year, we did a little bit different of a process. We have some routine things, as you will see on here, that are activities that come every single year to the city, and we've asked for those to be reviewed administratively, and so Faye and her staff take care of doing that for us with their recommendations brought to our committee and ultimately now from the committee to council. One thing I just wanted to lift up, the National Intercollegiate Flying Association. We have actually, takes place at the
Don Scott.
Don Scott, total blank there on the name of the airport, on the Don Scott, at the Don Scott Airport. And we've always had students that came before us who couldn't really answer the questions very effectively, and ultimately they actually never accessed any of the money. Well, it took it till last year for us to finally figure out that the students were long gone. And so that was why we never got any follow-up or anything, and this particular young man told us who the real person was. So he came this year. So he now understands what the process is and the expectation. And as you know, of course, Don Scott is not in the city of Dublin. However, they do use the Dublin hotels, and they bring in substantially more bed tax than the request that they asked for, and that they asked for more money than we're giving them. But so that is one of the reasons that, in spite of the fact that the actual physical location is outside of Dublin, the utilization of our hotels is essential to their success, really.
Excuse me, Marilyn, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's the one item on here that I had a question about. In fact, they, came, made requests back when I was on the finance committee.
Right.
And then I was aware that, they never followed up, and never accessed the money that was approved for them and so forth. But we're apparently convinced, that they're filling enough beds.
Yeah, they are. I mean,
Yes, actually, Scott was at our meeting, for his one, and was able to give us those numbers, and Faye had the numbers. She had contacted Scott ahead of time, so
He was painfully aware they've left money on the table and had not followed up.
yes,
So
this man is a new director for this program, but so he was happy to know that he even had access to money outside of the university.
But Scott is supportive.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes, we had a letter of support from him, actually. You'll also see that we had one request that we're delaying the decision on, and I will allow them to come back when they're at any point and that is the Dublin AM Rotary, who is looking to develop something along the lines of our former Blarney Bash for 2015. But are looking for some planning and marketing development money. But their current proposal wasn't far enough along in the process. So we suggested that we hold that one, and they will come back, and we'll hear it at that time. And then finally, we are recommending disapproval of a $4,000 grant request submitted by the Dublin United Soccer Club. They were instructed to come to our meeting, and they did not show and did not contact us to indicate they weren't coming. So this is our recommendation as a committee, and I move that we approve it as presented.
And I'll second that.
And if you call for the vote.
Vice Mayor Salee.
Yes.
Mayor-elect Leiter.
Yes.
Ms. Genesee Zerker.
Yes.
Mr. Gerber.
Yes.
Mr. Keenan.
Yes.
Mr. Reiner.
Yes.
Again, thank you, Faye, for all of your work. I know you had something else bigger on your mind this year, but we were happy that you carved out enough time for us.
Thank you. Mike, you want to lead off roundtable?
Yeah, speaking of Faye, noteworthy, we, Marilee, myself, and staff, and Marcia, attended the Dublin Visitors Convention Bureau, the awards luncheon the other day. They introduced everybody, a lot of dignitaries, including council members and the mayor, and then they introduced Faye as Dublin's tax collector. And it was kind of this murmur in the crowd. And Faye took it very good-naturedly and actually had some good press after that by Mr. Logan. Jeff Logan had a few comments for the crowd that really wasn't the right way to treat one of Dublin's finest. So thank you for your patience there. So I have one request to staff. I don't want an answer tonight, but in the report on the bond rating, there is a paragraph that talks about our employee pension burden, and I'd just like to have staff weigh in on that and tell me a little more about that later, okay? Thank you, that's all I have.
Thanks. Rick?
I really don't have anything except to wish everybody a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Great, thanks. John?
You know, I'm a little bit worried phasing down the State House, and I'm just worried somebody's going to snatch you away. We're going to lose a major asset. The final selection for the 161-270 Freeway Art project has been concluded, and I want to thank the citizenry and the four-person committee who worked on that. And I'd like to give, again, special thanks to Sarah Ott, who just did a fantastic job on a really short-timed term project of a couple months throwing this thing together. So, and that's probably, of all our different art projects, it's probably going to be the art project that most people are going to see when they think of Dublin. So I just think you did a great job selecting the facilitator and putting the whole project together. So thank you. For the first time, Dublin is going to join 900 U.S. locations on Saturday, December 14th, as nearly 1 million wreaths will be placed at veterans' graves as part of the annual National Wreaths Across America program. This program started in 1992 as a way to remember and honor veterans prior to the holidays on the second Saturday of December. Dublin resident and Korean War veteran O.J. Kaplan, who's a Strategic Air Command hero, is leading this local effort of placing 286 wreaths at the Dublin Cemetery, 7 wreaths at the Indian Run Cemetery, and 4 wreaths at the Davis Cemetery. This is the first time a Wreaths Across America will be in Dublin. Area Boy Scouts will participate in the placing of the wreaths. The program will start at noon at the Dublin KIA Cemetery, and the wreath program will include a color guard gun salutes to each branch of the service. The mission of the program is to remember, honor, and teach about the service and sacrifices of our veterans, active military, and their families. And this is a great thing that, you know, a citizen has stepped forward and put this program together for us. It comes at no expense to the city of Dublin, and I think I see old O.H. Kaplan is out in the audience. O.H., could you just stand up or come up, or you would like to say something? Come on up.
Let me tell you a couple of things. 35 years ago, I attended my last council meeting. I was city manager of Westville at the time. I was city manager of Blue Ash, and I know why I don't attend council. But anyway, I got to tell you something. My name is O.H. Kaplan. Okay, everybody calls me Oz. Now, O.H. is not I.O. I am a Spartan. Oh! From Michigan State! And don't boo, please. I sat next to this guy for 6 years when I was the director of the Merrifield Village Association. And every time I came home, my wife said, oh, I can tell another dreary meeting. But I tell you, the finest job I ever had was being city manager of Westerville, Ohio. You talked about Oxford, England today. I was there. You talked about, the services. I was a Air Force man, flyboy, over in Oxford, England. I saw a runner there. His name was Roger Bannister, and he broke the 4-minute mile. 6 years later at Michigan State, I broke the 4-minute mile in practice. But anyway, for some 30-some years, I worked for Dave Thomas as a vice president there. I knew the first 3 CEOs of Wendy's. They all lived in Westerville. And one day, I called up Jim Neer. I says, Jim, you think that there is somebody with Westville City Council who would like to have a good man? And they hired me. But anyway, what I was looking for, more than anything else for the last 35 years, was a cause where I could dedicate myself to that cause. I had two uncles. They died in the First World War. I had a brother who was wounded on the Rhine River in the Second World War. I served in the Air Force. I flew for the 93rd Bombardment Squadron. I was in headquarters with the bombardment wing. We flew B-47s with nuclear weapons aboard. I had friends that died, schoolmates that died during the Korean War. I had friends that died during the Vietnam War. I had a friend of a father who died during the Gulf War. And for this last few years, you have done a great job setting up a monument to honor those who have passed on. What we are doing, we are honoring every soldier, airman, Coast Guard, Merchant Marine, whoever, an Air Force man, flyboys, who have died for the cause to protect America. That is my cause. Last year, I went to the Davis Cemetery because I never got involved with Koreans across America until around December 1st, and I went to the Davis Cemetery and I set down 3 wreaths for those who had served during the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, and the Spanish-American War. And I says, why don't we expand this to include all Dublin? Incidentally, I've lived here for 34 years in the Dublin. I'm very proud of the city. And I see things. I am like an ex-president. You don't comment on other city managers. You don't comment on every other council. But you know what they're doing wrong and what they're doing right. And I will tell you unequivocally, you guys are doing it right. You're also doing it wrong in some respects. But someday I'll tell you about that. But anyway, economic development, really, and I could go on, but I don't want to do that. So we are going to, as John explains, we are going to place 286 wreaths at the Dublin Cemetery, 7 at the Indian Run Cemetery, and 4 over in Davis that holds the graves of the founders of Dublin. Dudley, who will be there probably to watch me and see if I do this thing right, and I got to tell you, I know I'll do it right. This is our first. But we are hoping that we can expand upon this and bring in other communities to also provide a ceremony, a wreaths across America in their cemeteries. There are 100, as I said, private and public cemeteries, and we hope to make this an event that will include all Central Ohio. That's about all I have to say. I would invite you to attend. If you don't attend, that's fine too, because I don't expect a lot of people to be there. We have 60 volunteers. And I want to say the city of Dublin, when I asked them for some help and cooperation, they were there. Sue Burness, Brandy Fox, Vince Vanceselli, they all went to bat for me. We have 60 volunteers, including him, both servicemen. And we have the VFW, the American Legion, Boy Scouts, 60. And a year ago, I didn't think I could pull this off, but we did. Thank you.
Can you give us the date again?
Saturday, August 14th, 12 o'clock sharp.
December.
This December, right. It's a national holiday. It was established a national holiday by Congress in 2008.
Right.
And this year, 900 communities will be placing wreaths at graves. including 110,000 at one cemetery, Arlington. Out of 400,000, we're placing 110,000 this year. Thank you.
Well, congratulations. Thank you.
Thanks, Oz.
Anything else, John?
No, I think Oz said it all.
Okay. Thank you, Mary Lee.
Whew, that's a hard act to follow. A couple follow-up things on memos we received. I was wondering if the city had already sent a formal response to the Capelstone Lane petition.
Yeah, actually, Michelle's been working on that, and she's had contact with the resident that sent in the request. There's been information sent to them, and I believe they're scheduling a meeting with engineering and planning sometime this month.
Correct. I've talked with the president of the association. We haven't sent a formal letter or anything back to the association, but we will be meeting with him, I believe, next week.
So what does this mean, that you're taking it over as a public street?
No, there's a process in place within our code, which
Right.
I outlined in this memo, and the process is to bring an application forward to planning and zoning first, and for them to review the criteria that's used to accept a private street as public, and then planning and zoning would make a decision to accept or not to accept that street. And then at that point, if planning and zoning would recommend or say that they would not accept the street, then the association would be able to come forward to council at that point in time.
So if I read correctly, which maybe I didn't, they don't meet the criteria.
They do not.
Okay. Thank you. The Kaufman Road fence update. I was struck by that only 5 people came to the original meeting you had. And perhaps you know why that might have been such poor attendance, only a third of the people that were invited. I was wondering whether, not knowing exactly what houses, but some of those along there, whether the owners really weren't the ones living in the houses or something.
I'm not really sure why only 5 showed up. We did get some calls afterwards of individuals saying they couldn't make it that evening and were interested and wanted some follow-up information. Laura Ball has now met with, I believe, 7 or 8 of the homeowners to look at some landscaping options. We've tracked down some numbers, we think, some telephone numbers for a few others, and I think we're just going to have to do some follow-up letters to the remainder of them. To see if we can get some resolution on this.
I know Tom Holton had sent us an email regarding what he felt was short notice for our last public meeting on, I think it was Bridge Street. And I just want to be sure that anytime we're having these public meetings, we really are giving people more than a week's notice, frankly, because I know my own schedule, if I was only notified a week ahead of time, it's unlikely that I would be able to attend meetings. So, and I know we don't generally do more than a week ahead of time, but in this day and age, especially with the use of social media and all that, at least, save the date kinds of things could be, might enhance participation of some people.
And this was a 2-week notice, this letter?
Yeah, I'm not saying this was a
have been.
particular one, but I noticed that, we had received an email on something else on that. I don't think I had any other comments on anything that you're responsible for, but I don't know maybe what you're responsible for anymore. The Brand Road Shared Use Path, I, of course, drive down there a lot, especially now that the roundabout's open, and I've had a lot of positive comments I might add about that roundabout, and I've traveled it almost every hour of the day, except maybe 2 a.m. to 6, and there's like nobody in it. I mean, it's like so remarkable how quickly people adjust and how something really, in some respects, that's simple. Although we had to purchase a lot of land and everything to get this done, but it's really fabulous and been cleaned up very well, considering that, we can't do all of the work at this particular point in time. But I wanted to be sure, based on the fact that the path, that we're building going west, is not going to be able to be finished, obviously, until 2014, that we make sure all of the big machines, though, are gone. I did notice today that the big ones around the roundabout are gone, but,
Right.
and they'd been there up until yesterday or something, but because they're in front of people's houses and everything, and if they're not really going to be working.
We will make sure of that.
Okay. And then I had a question about the state capital budget request. I guess I was just surprised that we would request this. I certainly think the fiber is an interesting one to take to a state capital budget, but the Miracle League playing surface, why would we do that?
Well, there's 3 different areas that they have for requests. One is economic development, and that's the fiber request. The second is cultural arts, and the third is other. And 4 years ago or 5 years ago, we received considerable funding for the accessible playground at Emerald Fields. And so this is comparable or a similar type of project to that. And we felt that it was something that not only serves the Dublin community, but a broader community with the number of participants that come across the state, and felt that it would be something good for state capital budget requests.
And what's the time frame for decision-making?
Yeah, the requests are due, I believe it's this Friday, all of them, and I don't know exactly when the decision is made on the request. We'll find that out.
I'm sorry to see that Steve Sova, he seems to have been here forever. Maybe I'm wrong, but.
Yeah, was here 13 years, 15 years, I think, yeah.
Yeah, has left us. Last week was the Ohio Municipal League Board meeting, and held here in Dublin. And quite a large part of our meeting was Randy Cole, who speaking to us, who is the president of the Ohio Controlling Board. And his message had to do with shared services and the importance of shared services and why they're pushing shared services. And this was on for an hour before finally somebody stepped in on the board and said, we've been doing them for all of our life, and gave lots of examples of how municipal governments have shared services. And I commented on some as he was sitting in Dublin that we have. And he was happy. Of course, he knew that we had done these things. But this is something that the administration, of course, feels strongly is this is the way that local governments can save money, and that the reduction of the local government fund and the estate tax and the NOL and other things that are being recommended for the future, that through shared services that local governments can make up those differences. I think the message that this group sent back through him was that just isn't true, that you have regulations that are required through police, fire, and other things that even if you don't get money from the state, you still have the same staffing requirements, that you need to do, and so you have to figure out other ways of funding that. And some of the members that are there, of course, they represent the whole state of Ohio, not just locally, indicated that they had to recently pass income tax or sales tax increases and things of that nature in order to try to begin to recoup some of their dollars. But it was an interesting meeting, and they do have, we'll give this to Ann, the Municipal Government League has now, through something that I thought they should be doing, have legislative priorities, and so they now have a little sheet that they now have that on, and this is what their attorneys will be spending the majority of their time on in the next couple of years. The other, besides Senate bill or House Bill 5, which of course takes up a lot of attention of everybody, which was also discussed, we also had discussion regarding the annexation bill, because that also is not had a lot of discussion because of House Bill 5, but would change the Type 2 procedures that are going on at this time, which I think we ought to be looking at that and having our lobbyists be talking to our representatives and senators in our opposition against any changes to that. Other than that, happy holidays to everybody.
Thank you. Amy?
I just wanted to respond to something Mayor Lee commented on about notices. I've been having ongoing conversations with Marcia, and I think Marcia might want to share a project that staff is undertaking because we've had some issues that I've been personally involved in and aware of with, different types of notices being given or not to different resident groups, so.
Yeah, and actually, planning staff prepared a memo that was distributed today. I didn't get a chance to review it prior to the council meeting, and one of the areas that was discussed related to all the notices that are required by code as it relates to rezonings and projects that we do, and then some of our practice outside of the requirements. And one of the specific projects that's discussed is the Shire Rings corridor study, and it provides details as to the notices that we gave, the time frame in which they were given, and it's a pretty broad range of information that was sent out from the residents or property owners within a certain number of feet from the corridor study, residents of Ballantrae, homeowners association, their information, and others who had attended previous meetings. So we try very hard to make sure public notice is given. The e-news that was sent out was a notice of, I guess it could be considered a reminder, but something that was sent out a couple days before the hearing was held. And Amy's also referring to the rezoning or the concept plan for the villages at Kaufman Park, and the concern that some residents had expressed that they had not been given notice of the activity that was going on with regard to that plan. And we have information that the planning staff put together for the meeting last Thursday evening when the concept plan was held that outlines or provides detail of all the notices that were given. And there were notices that were sent directly to the residents. I believe instead of having the individual resident names, it just said resident. So I don't know if that's something that they disregarded or didn't see the notice, but we will get you the memo that was prepared by planning as well as the information that was prepared for the last Thursday evening concept plan and the notices that were given for the zoning or the P&Z meetings that related to that project.
Yeah, the issue wasn't with the Kaufman Park plan wasn't so much that residents were not aware that there was activity or that there was going to be a hearing at Planning Commission. They were aware of that. It's just those individual properties were actually being rezoned, and they weren't notified of the fact that their properties were being rezoned. And that was something that really, upset some of the residents. They felt like they had been misled or kept in the dark about that fact. But regardless, I think the city, believed that they did, what they needed to do. But my question with Marcia is, we probably need to do a better job in terms of what we do in terms of notification, whether it's required by law or whatever, something of that magnitude I think folks, would want to know about. So anyway, I appreciate the follow-up, and I'll look forward to looking at the memo, and then we can review, what our wishes are going forward in terms of noticing folks. Other than that, I just want to thank staff for another great year and another great term on council. I look forward to seeing everybody back in 2014 where we'll all be sworn in again, and I'll have a new member join us. And everybody else, Happy New Year and Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays.
Thanks, Amy. I'd also like to add my congratulations to all of the staff that were responsible for achieving the highest possible ratings, the Fitch and Moody's ratings that we received, and certainly they do the hard work, but the leadership shown by council and the administration, that's no small feat. It's very important. I think it was also in that memo that it was noted that the size of our reserves, contributed to that rating, and taking into account our debt, long-term debt obligations and so forth. So, I think that's another testament to our sound fiscal management and another response to those that would criticize the size of our reserves. Also, in our packets was a letter, that I think is, it's certainly a testament to how we strive to do business. This is the one from Ralph and Susie Fiesel regarding the Highland Croy Brand Road roundabout, complimenting our contractor, the Eigel Company, and that's. I think it's important. I'm sure we do stress to our contractors the extent to which they're an extension or a reflection of us, the city, and we certainly appreciate when they give the good service that they do. I guess outstanding service in this particular instance. So it could be passed along to the extent it hasn't already. Our appreciation for their efforts. And then also, Mr. and Mrs. Fiesel make mention of one of our employees, Dean Saunders, and his efforts. And, Marcia, I'm sure that you've complimented him. I'm sure you have, Paul, that you've shared this with him. But also on behalf of council, our thanks to him, again, representing the city well and representing city council well, and we appreciate that. Also, my thanks to staff for a great 2013. We continue to be leaders in the Central Ohio region in many respects. I'd written down a number of examples, but to name them, I'm sure I'd leave somebody out. But we truly are leaders within the region. And I think we're also responsible leaders. Not only do we act in the best interests of our citizens, but we also, our actions, I think many times are in the best interests of the entire region and benefit the entire region. So I would encourage staff to reflect on your many successes this past year and take a moment and applaud yourselves. And we look forward to another successful year in 2014. So I'd like to wish everybody happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and Happy New Year. We'll see you in 14. Good night.